Doo-doo-dee. It's Nandi!
Hello friends. The new year brings new characters, and with the January patch we have Isaak, the Genestealer Cult Primus. Isaak only has one trait, the ambush trait that is characteristic of the Genestealer Cult faction. The stats on screen are at Diamond 3. I'll take a closer look later on to show you how this compares to other characters in the game. Isaak has a base movement speed of 3 and a bio attack in both melee and range. Isaak's active ability is called Cult Demagogue. It has 3 parts to it. This targets an enemy within 2 hexes and places decoys on random hexes within a 2 hex radius around the target. Then, Isaak summons neophyte hybrids on half of all of the friendly decoys in the area, and all of the hybrids in the area immediately take a turn. The passive ability is called Decoys and Misdirection. This ability also has 3 parts to it. First, if an enemy steps onto the decoy, they take blast damage. Next, when a friendly unit resurrects or moves onto a friendly decoy, it gains bonus damage until end of turn. If that unit is a Genestealer Cult, you also create more decoys. Both those abilities are pretty complex, so we can take a look at how they fit together in this gameplay clip. Here, Isaak faces off against Calgar. When we use Isaak's active, Cult Demagogue, you can see how 8 decoys are summoned, and then 4 neophyte hybrids spawn and immediately take a turn. You can immediately see some cool interplay with the active and passive abilities. Stepping onto a decoy grants friendly units bonus damage for a turn, denoted by the buff icon that you can see over the characters. Clearly, the hybrids are coded in a way to move and take advantage of these buffs. Again, as the passive points out, when a Genestealer Cult unit steps onto one of those decoys, it isn't consumed. Rather, the unit gets the buff and a new decoy is created. When Calgar moves onto the decoy, he takes a small amount of blast damage. A turn later, Calgar uses his active ability to destroy all of the Genestealer Cult units. They all respawn courtesy of their ambush mechanic, and when they respawn they all have the damage buff again, decoys and misdirection, granting them bonus damage for a turn. This is sort of entry level stuff, but the skills get more interesting when we combine other characters. The character that I'm most excited about combining with Isaak is the Patermine. Isaak's active creates a lot of decoys, and this means that the Patermine, who up until now has struggled to create Genestealers through his active ability, now has an easy way to fill the battlefield. The Genestealer summons are reasonably strong and can resurrect, so getting 2 or 3 or 4 with one active can completely swing a battle in your favour. Here, you can also see that when the Patermine steps onto a decoy, a new one is created, which makes life easier for us and doesn't potentially cost us a Genestealer summon. Sadly, the bonus damage buff does not improve the Patermine's active ability. The interplay with Xybia should be fairly obvious. Xybia is the only other character in the game that can also create the same type of summon as Isaak, the neophyte hybrid. If one of those neophytes is in the area of effect when Isaak uses his active, they will also take a turn. There is also a nice bit of ability sequencing stuff. When Xybia ends her movement on top of a decoy, Isaak creates a new decoy to spawn, and then Xybia's passive triggers, so you still get the neophyte hybrid. We've already demonstrated that the Genestealer summons like to step onto the decoys and gain a damage buff. However, other summons don't see decoys in the same way, which is nice. In this clip with Tangida's Skitari summon, it doesn't make any effort to try and take the decoys, which lets you preserve them for your Genestealer Cult units. The other thing to point out is more niche but may be relevant if you have a smaller roster. It's just worth emphasizing that the damage boost from stepping onto the decoys doesn't just apply to the Genestealer Cults units. Here you can see Ragnar with the same damage benefit after stepping onto a decoy. The trouble I have with this is that the spawned decoys are random, so you can't rely on them for consistent damage benefits. The passive has wording that says when a unit resurrects from a decoy, a new decoy is summoned. Theoretically, there is room for interpretation that a single decoy left alive could cause a chain respawn of every single Genestealer Cult unit. However, as you can see here, that dream scenario does not occur. The Genestealers respawn according to the number of decoys available at the start of the respawn process, and then the duplicate decoy or decoys are made. One of the common questions I get asked is how does the enemy AI control a character on defense? I have running on screen a couple of AI versus AI battles. Isaak is on both teams and seems to use his active when there is a reasonable amount of free hexes nearby, but not always. The battles do get pretty confusing, for me at least, with the number of units, summons and decoys that can be on the battlefield at once. I suppose you aren't always going to have a Genestealer versus Genestealer fight, but this on screen is a bit overwhelming for me. Having talked through his kit and showcased his abilities, here is a summary slide that shows the abilities and stats of Isaak at various cutoffs. Feel free to pause or screenshot if you'd like. The character is summarized on screen in my usual infographic style. Its numbers on the right are at Diamond 3. Tawin, Tacticus, Ambassador and Friend has run those comparatively against the existing characters. As with the other Genestealer Cult characters, the health and armor stats are on the lower side to compensate for the character's ability to resurrect through ambush. That leads us to consider where the character might shine. Let's start with Horde modes. Isaak has some potential to distract enemies on a key turn, say in survival mode. Other than that, I don't think that he'll be particularly great here, and accordingly I've given him a 2. What about War? The summon spam, 4 in a turn, all of whom can resurrect and continue to be annoying, is a great boon. More than any of the other faction characters, he seems to be the glue that holds them all together. I would have given Isaak a 4 if you take him just for his summons in a random team, but would raise that score to a 5 in a pure Genestealer Cult team. Finally, guild raids. I'm just not seeing it for him here, sadly. I don't think he's unusable, but he is hard to fit into a good team in my humble opinion. A score of 1.5. With 4 out of the 5 characters for the faction already known, that doesn't leave many options for the Genestealer Cult's 5th character. Given that we know that the Tacticus characters generally also have an official Games Workshop model, I thought I would take a look at the range on their website. Scrolling through the website, there really aren't many options. I can't speculate too freely, but I'd be keen to know in the comments who you think the faction might have as their final character. Much like the Blood Angels, the factions seem to have a lot of synergy with each other in a way that makes some of the older factions look on in envy. There you go, another character showcase done and in the books. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll sign off with a final thank you to my Patreons who have been incredibly supportive and giving me the platform to continue to do this sort of work. Thanks very much. If you haven't done so yet and you're a newer player, I'd love if you could consider entering my referral code as seen on screen. Thanks very much, bye.
Doo-doo-dee. It's Nandi!